Hey y'all, from Spindle Mountain Mercantile. I am Heather, and today I finally remembered to bring along the project with the black and silver book. In fact, I did 2 black and silver book projects, so make sure to stick around for the last one. Let's jump right in with project number 1, and by the way, welcome to my YouTube channel. We're using Iron Orchid Designs air dry clay and their new mold called Bookish. All of the IOD products I'm using on today's projects are available on our website at spindlemountainmercantile.com. When I make a mold, I like to use one piece of clay, and that way it's less likely to break or crack. I just get it in there real tight and make sure it's smushed down enough that all the details will show. And then I go back and I smooth the back, or what's facing me, with my fingers to make sure it's flat. And this released really well without using any cornstarch or tapioca flour until it didn't. It was just the end, and it came out with just a little coaxing from my fingers. When I'm using a mold with tiny little flowers or other details, I like to use tapioca flour to help it release better. Other creators use cornstarch, but I find tapioca flour leaves smaller pock marks. I'm using my fingers to make this just a little distressed because I accidentally did that in the last Bookish mold I used in I think it was in the first summer release video Mama and I did. I'll leave a link for it in the description. Anyway, I did it on accident and I liked it so much that now I'm going to probably always do it intentionally. When I was done, put it on a piece of poster board. I took it outside and spray painted it with Rust-Oleum aluminum spray paint. I really want this book to look like it's over 100 years old, so I used a lot of different items to make different gouges in it. I used the flat edge of a butter knife, a little square box, and a little round jar. I also used my knuckles and I scratched it some with my fingernails. The reason I use different things is because over time, a book's not just going to slam up against one corner. In 100 years, it's going to get messed up in lots of different ways. So I felt like this was just a little bit more realistic looking. I'm going to decorate it with Athenaem, which is our new gilded transfer from the summer 2026 release. It's full of silver and gold transfers that were taken from books that were written over 100 years ago, and it's super fun. A lot of the product in this summer's release were inspired by old books, and I am here for that. I decided on this design that doesn't have any words, and I centered it, but I only centered it on the actual cover. You know how when the book binding comes around and it has that little extra space? I didn't want to include that where I centered it. So it will look like it's off to the right, but I promise it's not. I'm going to add something there later to make that look better. I picked out some words that I thought would look like an appropriate title, and then I added this little part at the bottom that says with illustrations, and I did not center that. I put it over towards the left. I think that makes the off-centered floral design look more intentional. Now I'm going to work on the binding, and I made a mistake, y'all. I put this over thinking that paint was dry so I could add the glue. Yeah, guess what happened? When I lifted it up, there was a big chunk of paint missing. And guess what happened? I loved it. I didn't even have any bad words under my breath. I was like, oh, well, there's another good mistake. Next, I added Ruba Buff, and you can get this at Hobby Lobby, but I have found some pretty decent deals on Amazon, and I'll leave a link for those in the description. If you buy something from Amazon by using my link to get there, they will give me a small compensation, but won't raise your price. I used this all along the edges of the book. Anywhere there's a one of those gouges, I tried to press it in more. I wanted it to look like gilding that over the years had just kind of smeared in different areas of the book. I used that same silver Ruba Buff to the area on the Bookish mold that got peeled off, and I really liked it, but it didn't look balanced, so I took my little serrated edge of my butter knife and just scraped off the top in another area. And I love how this looks. I have another book I did something with, and when I was taking off one of the tags, the stickers on it, I peeled off the top part of the book and it left this like, I don't know, it just was like linen fabric without any color on it. And I thought that looked awesome. And I feel like this does that same thing. It looks natural. It looks like if leather had been scratched off. I filled in a little bit of silver where I missed it on the pages, and then I added this garland along the side to make the front look balanced, and I had enough left over to put a little bit behind where it says with illustrations. I'm not sure what I'll do with this book. I might put it with another one like it and make a book stack, but for now, let's just look at how cute it is alone. For project number 2, I'm gonna zhuzh up these little, I don't know what they are. They're wooden, and we found them in the dumpster at the clockmaker's auction. I thought maybe they'd be good needle holders for my mama, but they have a hole in the bottom. So if you know what they are, let me know. I'm painting them with Debbie's DIY Cottage Color Vintage Mint. Cottage Colors are a collaboration between Debbie Beard and Jamie Ray Vintage. They are an all-in-one paint that includes the primer, the paint, and the sealer. I gave them one coat, let that dry thoroughly, and I added a second coat. When the second coat was dry, I got out one of my favorite transfers from this new release, and it's called the Belgravia. There are a lot of cute little florals in this, and I thought they would be perfect on my little whatever you call them. I made sure the center where the whitest part of the floral is would fit, and then I worked my way around to the side, and that's where I started rubbing. It's not that hard to put transfers on something that's round. So don't let that scare you. The reason it's easy is because that plastic carrier sheet the transfer is adhered to is pretty thick and it wants to stay flat. So when you're putting your transfer on a curved object or a round object, that carrier sheet will try to stay flat. So it kind of naturally releases your transfer onto your item. Now, if a piece doesn't get all the way adhered, you can just lay that carrier sheet back down and rub again. It should be fine unless your paint wasn't dry or maybe your item is dirty. I worked my way all around and then I burnished it with my fingers. When you burnish, you just rub it, and you can use the plastic carrier sheet or the white wax papery kind of paper that's on the other side of the transfer. But on a lot of things, I prefer to use my finger. I did the second little thingamajigger the same way. To seal them, I used Debbie's Big Top. And I tried dunking them in there and that didn't work, so I had to brush off some of the excess. Now, I might add some hot glue to that little hole, and that way we could still use them as a needle holder in our sewing kit. My sweet husband found some corks that fit in them perfectly. I'm curious, though, how would you use these little thingy-majiggers? Project number 3 is this really cool statue picture I had in my booth for way too long, probably 2 years. I had marked it down to $89. It's worth a bit more. It has sold for more. I think it sold for $175 in one place online. I can't get that for it here. And I just don't know how much more I want to mark it down. So I thought, you know what? Let's just play with it and see what happens. I'm cleaning it with my Sprayway glass cleaner. You can get this stuff just about anywhere. the grocery store or hardware store. I order mine on Amazon because I have found a good deal for a multi-pack, but you still might be able to get it cheaper at your grocery store. The paper on the back of this had been torn and I couldn't save it. I like to save that to reuse it just to save money and time. I'm using my point driver. I was introduced to this by Bailey over at Reclaimed Grace. She said that you would pay for it like with your first picture you sell in your booth, and she was absolutely correct. I will leave a link for this in the description. I need to order more craft paper, so I didn't show you how I cover it, but I have lots of videos about that. I was going to stick with the new summer release, but y'all, Madeleine from the spring release this year. Oh, I still love Madeleine so very much. So that's what I'm using. Right here, you can see how I just laid out my design and got an idea of what I wanted to do. This was super easy to apply. In fact, when you put your transfers down, do not take off that wax paper protective sheet because they will stick to the glass if it's real clean. And as you saw, this glass was real clean. I don't know if these are storks or herons, whatever they are, they curve the same exact direction as her little neckline. And oh, I just thought this is where they belong. So I had to do them a little bit uneven, and that means I had to cut off some of the flowers. One on the right and one on the left. I did end up adding some back in so there wouldn't be, it wasn't really straight lines, but just, well, you'll see. I just filled it in. If there was a place where maybe I didn't cut so good, I tried a fussy cut, and that means you cut all the little edges around whatever it is, a floral or a leaf. And so it was kind of straight. Wherever that was, I just put another flower over it. I put the long curved parts at the top with the ribbon, and then I found some of the same ribbon in another place that had a bow. Then I cut out just little bits of ribbon that would fit in between that. And I did make them long enough so they would touch where the other ribbon stopped. I hope that makes sense. You can probably get close to this and see what I'm talking about. And I did the same thing as I did below, where there was a place like where the ribbon didn't exactly match. I just put a floral over that. I did the same thing to the other side. And I like how it's not really balanced at the top. The right-hand side has more florals than does the left-hand side, and I think that looks really sharp. From the same page, I used some curved swags. I had to cut them in half. So I just cut them where there was a stem, and then I put them down so that they fit together again, and I just put that stem right over where I cut it off. It's really easy to layer these and to cut them as you need. I really encourage you to find something that you can use that creativity with, and don't be afraid. If you are afraid, practice with maybe some leftover pieces that you don't care if you ruin them. And if it doesn't work, you can always scratch off what you did. You don't have to seal transfers that are applied to glass. And I think I'm just going to keep this in my booth as a display for my IOD anyway. But if I do sell it, I will tape a note to the back that says to clean it with a soft, dry towel. and not to use any spray on it. I like to call these statue pictures Flat Persephone because they remind me so much of the mold IOD made called Persephone. I just think she looks a lot better adorned with flowers, storks, and a little bee in her bonnet. Wouldn't you agree? For $3.99, I scored this great square picture at the thrift store. The frame and mat are in great condition and I love them. Not so crazy about the picture though. So I've been wanting to do this project and I needed a square frame for it. On the back, I cut out the paper so I can reuse it later. And I also peeled off all of the parts where the paper had been glued on, or it was probably double sticky tape. It actually came off fairly easily. And then I removed the picture from the mat. For this project, I'm using the new transfer from the 2026 release called the Belgravia. I have had this idea for a while. You know how plate wreaths are all the rage? Well, I'm going to make one with pictures. I cut out all of the plates that were the same size and I arranged them. I had a couple left over from the first book of Belgravia I used because I'm on my second one. It's been like a week, so there. Before I apply the plates, I need to have a wreath with some greenery, and for that I'm using some transfers from the IOD book called Fronds. Now with this, I didn't put them down and figure out exactly where I wanted them first. I simply cut out the greenery that I liked best, and I put 4 big pieces in the corners, but kind of so it's curved at the corners. It doesn't go up to the point of the square part of the frame. And then I filled it in with other greenery. I used leaves and fern fronds. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out how to do this. I did cut some of the bigger ferns in half, just right up the center on the stem, because I knew that they wouldn't show on the inside. These are mostly going to show outside of the plates. Because I'm putting the glass back on top of this, I did not seal it. I am replacing the back and putting the same paper. Oh, and I did not use my point driver with this. It was really thick with that mat, so I went ahead and just pushed down the little points that were already in it. I'm using ramboard tape to reattach the original paper that was with it. I do wish I would have put something behind the teapot where the bird is in the center. Maybe kindest regards. I love that stamp and I think that would look really neat, just lightly stamped behind that. But I like everything else about it and I think that makes up for it. In the comments, let me know what you think about my plate wreath picture. For project number 5, I had to spray paint this book black. I didn't have to spray paint project number 1 because it was a black book. But now I'm showing you how I painted the edges of the pages. I'm using aluminum spray paint again, and I just held up that paper at the edge so that it wouldn't spray onto where I had painted this book black. I need this to be held super tight while I do the next step, so I'm putting it in a vise. If you do not want your book distressed, do this before you paint. I want my book to look distressed and as old as possible while not falling apart. I used a tape measure to figure out how far away from the edges I wanted to do the next step. And I decided 1.5 inches would be good. So from the 1.5 inches on each side, I went in between those, and that's where I found my middle spot. For a lot of projects I get my ideas from somebody else and I turn it into something of my own. I mean, people share their content because they want you to make something like theirs. I do try to give credit where it's due, though, and today, credit is due me. I thought of this all by myself. For this project, I'm using 3 test tubes. I found mine at a yard sale, but you can get them on Amazon. You can use plastic or glass. I prefer the glass. It costs a little bit more, but I think it's worth it. After I made sure my drill bit was larger than my test tube, I started drilling on the bottom area where I'm putting the first test tube. I'm holding this with my hand, so it's like, hope you don't get vertigo or something. Don't fall over. Take a seat. All right, so I decided that's not going to work. I'm going to put my phone down, and when we come back to see what I did, we will magically have a pretty little hole drilled. Mind you, to get it pretty and straight, I had to put a lot of pressure on that drill. I wanted it to go straight in, and I made it much deeper than this. I'm just showing you what it looked like. I turned the book over and did the other hole, and then for the middle, I had to add another clamp because it was making the paper spread out and get wide when I tried to do that middle hole because there wasn't anything holding it tight. It has to be super, super tight to make these holes. To measure the depth, you can put a little piece of tape around your drill bit, but I just put the test tubes in to make sure they were how deep I wanted them and they were even. We're using the same transfer book we used in project number 1 from the summer 2026 release. This book is called At- Ati- Athenaem. 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 It starts with and ends with much like many of my sentences. I'm cutting these out so that they fit. There's like 4, I think, little book binding silver, I don't know, little boxes. And it's just a little bit too long with 4 of them. I think there were 5 total. So I put the 2 end pieces on, and now I know exactly what I have room to work with in the center. And for the center, I laid them down so they were overlapping each other, and I tried to cut right between where I wanted them to meet so they would just butt up to each other. And I was getting a really uneven cut doing that, and I just didn't trust myself. So I cut one just a tiny bit longer than I thought it should be, and I put it down. Then I laid the other one down so that it went right barely over it. I just the main point was to make the design not look like it had just kinda, been 2 pieces put together. I wanted it to look like it was one design that continued out onto the to the sides. Gosh, I hope that makes sense. Maybe watching me makes more sense than listening to me. Man, I yeah, that's probably true in most areas of my life as well. I want the front to look like the cover of a book about flowers, so I found this one that says The Language of Flowers, and there are a bunch of different little designs. I decided to find some mirrored ones. I found the roses and then the like swags or garlands and put the roses on the top so that they're at an angle and that way they look like they're curving above the curvature of the picture I'm putting in the middle. And then for that garland, I cut off at the top of it. There's like 2 crisscrossing stems. I cut those right where they crisscross and put them right up to the roses. So it looks like it's one continuous piece. I was finished applying the transfers, I tied the top and the bottom with black lace, making sure it was as tight as I could get it. I tied the top in the back and pulled the 2 strands over to the front and tied them there. Now I have this can of varathane and I am using just a regular paintbrush to paint the outer edges of the pages. I also painted a goodly amount inside of the holes. I filmed this twice, y'all, and both times the camera was off, so I'm sorry about that. The reason I needed to use varathane and make sure this was sealed so it could be protected from water is because this book is now a bud vase. Okay, y'all, seriously, didn't that music sound like the theme from Twin Peaks? I know it started in 1990, and that's a little bit past the prime for us 80s ladies. I couldn't watch that because, I was raising little kids, and I thought it was weird anyway. I did watch it in the 2010s, and I kind of liked it. But it did remind me that the shows that were really good were the shows that you remember what night they were on. Am I right? Like Tuesdays. Tuesdays was Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, and Cheers, right? And of course, Sundays were for Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom and Disney. And I think that's the night Mama watched Murder, She Wrote. Thursdays was for Magnum. Come on now. And I don't know what was playing on Friday nights because that's the night we went cruising town. I feel old now. Okay, so what'd y'all think about the video? If you liked it, I hope you will give a thumbs up. And if you're new here, I hope you will subscribe and join my awesome viewers. I have the best subscribers on YouTube. And if you don't believe me, go read some of the comments. Mama and I are working on another video for next week, and we're hoping to put that out on Friday. Until then, we hope you have a wonderful week. And as always, we hope you are blessed. Bye.